Tricia and Brian Pottinger are the owners of Tricia's Rose City Framing in Tyler, Texas. Theirs is a story of faith and courage in the face of the unknown. Two high school sweethearts who leave their everyday lives in Ohio to spend 15 years as missionaries in Papua, the Indonesian half of Papua New Guinea. How this changed who they were as people, and even the ways it translates into their current business. I hope you will join me as we go and meet Tricia and Brian Pottinger.
Well, that's normal. Well, actually, that's not normal. I've turned out
What are you talking about?
to be the quiet one lately. And she's the...
Well, you weren't quiet at church this morning.
What?
When my friend and I were trying to tell our husbands to stop talking, and we got to go. They have to go, and we have to go. Stop talking, you two.
But we were talking about interesting stuff. Like
I know,
that
airplanes and
Alaska Airlines jet that blew out the
door.
door, blew off. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it happened not yesterday.
Yesterday or the day before,
I
yeah.
think it was Friday. Yeah. The emergency exit door just blew out the airplane.
Nobody messed with it or anything?
No, it just blew out. So now they grounded all, again, that 737 MAX, where they had the problems before where they grounded all of them. Well, they're mostly grounded again because here's another problem. So.
Good time for air travel, huh?
Yeah, just make sure you get that window seat at the emergency exit row because you might be able to have a quick way out the airplane if you need it. But watch that first step because it can be quite large.
Yeah. So today I'm interviewing Tricia and Brian Pottinger. They own Rose City Framing, or Tricia's Rose City Framing here in Tyler, and they were also missionaries for 15 years, and I'm sure have plenty of interesting stories. So I kind of like to go biographical with everything. So let's take it back to how y'all ended up meeting.
Go ahead.
Well, this is actually a funny story. We are childhood sweethearts. I think we met when he was 15 and I was 16. Yes, I'm an older lady. But
of a certain age.
We were at band camp, and I was up front giving some instructions for something, and he said to the guy next to him, "See that girl? That's the girl I'm going to marry." And the guy said, "Oh, really? That's my girlfriend."
That's true.
True story. And you can ask the guy because he actually supported us the 15 years we were in Papua.
So, how does it go from the bandstand to spending 15 years in a foreign country?
Well, that's never a straight line, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we, did a variety of different odd jobs. I joined the military. I was in the Army National Guard for 6 years. Tricia had... she was working at a chicken place, like cutting up chicken, and that's where I proposed to her before I went. Actually, I think I was just nervous because I was getting ready to go off to basic training, and I wanted to make sure she was going to stick around after that. No, it wasn't basic training; it was the next training. Whatever. I was going off for training. And I said, "Well, I better ask her to marry me before she gets." Before I head out and she finds a new boyfriend. So I did that at the chicken place, very romantic, right? And then actually not long after that, she left and started doing picture framing. I went off to the military for a while, came back, had a variety of odd jobs, just doing different things. We went to college, and that was the one thing our families kind of told us we weren't allowed to get married until we graduated from school. And but we actually got married, I think, when you had one more semester left in college. They said, okay, we're pretty sure she's going to finish. So we did that.
And then she dropped out. Right?
Yeah, and then she dropped out right after that. Just kind of a bit of a convoluted thing. We ended up owning our own businesses. I owned a custom printing company. We did a lot of advertising, printing, back when, junk mail was still a thing. You got in your mailbox was stuff full of flyers from car dealerships and whatnot. So we were responsible for a lot of that. You're welcome.
So send your complaints.
Yeah. Just send an email to him. And Tricia owned her own custom picture framing business. And then, one of the things about the printing business, especially in advertising, is you find out that, of course, anything in advertising is very cutthroat. Mm-hmm. And so it was really giving me a lot of anger management problems. I was turning me into a person that I really didn't want to be. And so I started learning how to fly when we first started the business. Of course, when you start up any kind of new business, you're working, 100 hours a week and those kinds of things. So, again, my family ganged up on me and said, hey, you need to get a hobby. And I think they were thinking more like stamp collecting or something like that. Yeah. So I'm on my way back from my customers. I see the little airplane fly over. I said, hey, that'd be cool. I'd really love to learn how to fly an airplane. So that became my hobby. I started flying. It just so happened that I was on my way to work one day and I heard a advertisement on the radio station saying that Mission Aviation Fellowship was in need of pilots, and they were looking for strong Christians that wanted to go overseas and fly airplanes. So I kind of looked into that, and that is a very long story. I think it took us from that point. I just really felt like God was calling us into missions. And talked to a lot of different people about it. I went home and told Tricia about it, and she's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And so, but it took, several years. I mean, from that point, it was 4 or 5 years, I think, to when we
finally got to on the field.
Yeah. So, have to jump through a lot of hoops and whatnot. And we looked at a lot of different organizations and ended up going with Mission Aviation Fellowship. And, we thought that God was calling us to Africa. And through several different organizations we looked at, they were all telling us they wanted us to go to Papua. And we're like, what's Papua? Where's that at? And so when we went to MAF, we're thinking, okay, well, they're going to send us to Africa. We requested Africa, and they're like, yeah, great, you're going to Papua. And so we're like, okay, I guess that's where we're going. And then we were there for about 15 years. Saw a lot of things and met a lot of people, and it was a really good experience.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get more into a lot of things and a lot of people, but I kind of want to know, like, your side, you got into framing and stuff. So how did that come about?
Well, I think Brian alluded to the fact that, I kind of did it during college, was doing picture framing during college, working for other people. And then, you start to have children and life starts to change. And I wanted to be home with my kids. And the only way to do that was for me to be the boss and have my own business. And so we did that, and it was for many, many years, but we did it, interestingly, without a storefront. So it was semi-mobile. So I would go to clients and businesses, and then the production facility was at our home, which afforded us the ability for me to raise our children, be home with our kids and still be a business owner. But loved every minute of it. And when Brian told me, that, he was interested in going into missions, and I told him, well, I'm not. This is a funny story, because I kind of said to him, I'm going to put something out there that's never going to happen, so I never have to go. So I said to him, well, we own this business, the printing business. It's not really worth any money, but we have a lot of money invested in it. I guess if we sell the business, and that was on Friday. And on Monday, our biggest customer walked in the door, our biggest client, and said, hey, we'd like to do in-house printing. Can I buy your business from you? Well, not only did God do it in record time, but in 3 days.
Yeah.
I didn't even I went from I am not doing this to Oh, I guess I am.
You got no choice now, right?
Yeah, and started a wonderful adventure. So, of course, I took a hiatus during those 15 years from framing after doing it for several years. And then when we came to Tyler, I worked somewhere else for a bit in the framing industry, and was a great job, especially during COVID, but it wasn't the kind of framing I wanted to do. And that's when we started investigating whether Tyler community was interested in another frame shop, because they have good local frame shops already. But do they need another one? And we discovered very quickly that they did. And I had built up a clientele at the other place that I worked at. So it was kind of natural that we should look into opening up our own. And I'm telling you, since day one, God has blessed us in so many ways that we could not have orchestrated any of this ourselves.
Yeah.
It's really been His goodness and His grace, because the people who have walked in the door, the really neat things that we've had the opportunity to frame has been amazing. And it's weird how that experience of the 15 years in Papua kind of actually does integrate itself with our current business in a weird way, because you think that they're totally unrelated. Yeah. But it's all about listening to people's stories, understanding that people come from a different perspective in life. And I think when you have a weird story, you are more interested in hearing other people's weird stories.
Because your story's already normal by now.
Exactly. Yeah. So when somebody says to me, oh, my wife's from Peru and I'm from blah, 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 we're always like, oh, tell us, how did that happen?
Yeah. That must be so weird to live there.
Exactly. So we purposefully spend a lot of time just getting to know people. And I think that comes from that experience.
Yeah. Now, y'all both seem like pretty entrepreneurial. So you're talking about, kind of the beginning of your framing and stuff. A lot of that was just so you would, be able to have time with your children and raise them. Did the entrepreneurial side of everything come easily for you, or?
Well, I'm going to let Brian answer this, because I think for us as a family unit, the entrepreneurial spirit came from him originally, because I'm not a risk taker. I enter life situations very cautiously, and that's a hard position for an entrepreneur. But Brian has a little bit more courage in areas like that, and that spirit really comes from him. So I'm going to let him answer that question.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Now he's like, what was the question again?
What was the question? So, it's, I think there's all kinds of different personalities out there. And yeah, I think Tricia's right that I've always been one when I see an opportunity. I'm kind of a big picture guy. So, I see an opportunity or I see something, it could be done better this way, and I jump right on it. So people call it type A personality or whatever. Through lots of different personality surveys, I found out I'm a dominant influencer. That's, there's like all these different personality characteristics, and dominance one and influencers another. So I like to dominate the conversation, but I like to influence everybody to my way of thinking about it. So I think that kind of leads to very naturally into more of a people person or outgoing, entrepreneurial kind of.
Probably good in the advertisement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when I see something, so like when it comes to doing the picture framing shop, she'd come home from work every day and be like, oh, I love my job, but I hate the other aspects that are non-framing aspects of it. And she goes, I just really don't want to go to work tomorrow. I don't want to, do this other stuff that they are always making me do. And so it was kind of like, how can I fix this? And so it was.
Should we stop?
we can stop if you want.
It's my dad. So just silence the phone. Sorry, very sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Phone ringing in the background.
He can navigate and edit.
Yeah. I can just cut out this whole section and.
Right.
You did press record, right? On the trigger.
Yes.
You could tell me double check that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
No, I did one interview. That was another one where I didn't bring my headphones by the time, and the effects was on, so the whole thing just sounded like we were in a tunnel recording the phone.
Oh, jeez.
So I silenced my phone too. Kids will probably call that one. Yes.
Yeah.
I think he does call one every Sunday, which is nice. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, she ran back there in her socks. I hope there's no glass on the floor.
I'm always walking around with my socks on.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. We were talking about your personality type.
Right. When she's coming home from work every day saying that, she's, really doesn't want to go to work tomorrow and she loves the framing, but she doesn't really like the other aspects of the job, started talking about, we had thought about opening our own, shop, is that something you'd be interested in? Of course, she's not very much of a risk taker. So, she was kind of, him-hawing about it. And I said, okay, whatever. So the next day, within a few days, I'm like out with a realtor looking for just lease retail space,
Yes.
And so we were able to find this space. Literally, I think I made the call. They answered. It was like 5:30 in the evening, and they still answered the phone. I looked at the space immediately, came back. We looked at it again the next day. We signed the lease like 2 days later, and then I'm in here for 3 months straight renovating and building out the new space, the space to for all the things that we need to do and getting the equipment. We had some equipment that was from the old frame shop that had been in storage, and of course we needed more. And so I'm kind of that kind of personality where I see a problem and I get it, I take care of it, I just get it done. And so the fact that I just was able to attack that, and my job being at night, I have a very weird schedule, and I'm able to work at night and also sleep at night. So I was able to spend all day, every day up here for 3 months getting the space ready to go. And then she put in her notice at the other store. And, I think she said, they asked why she was leaving. I think she said, I'm going to open my own frame shop. And they're like, oh, okay, sure you are. And, walks out of there, walks in here. We open the doors like,
A week later.
Yeah. And I think that really took them by surprise as like, oh, no, we've been building this for, 3 months.
But they were very kind. And, if anybody asked where I had gone, they were kind to tell them where I had gone. And, I left there with the highest integrity possible. I didn't tell any of my clients that I was leaving. Because I didn't want to harm my relationship with my boss and with the company that I was working for. They were paying my paycheck. And I knew that people would find me and, God would lead them here. And I actually just this week had a client come in that looked at me and she said, oh, I was over at the restaurant across and saw that there was a frame shop here. And she said, it's you. You used to do my framing. Yeah. So people do find me, and that's fun.
Yeah. How was the restaurant across the way? I don't remember.
It's good if you like sort of the Mediterranean style food.
Is it kind of Greek style? Or?
It's Mediterranean. Yeah.
Middle Eastern.
Middle Eastern. Yeah.
They do have like kebabs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I hear good things.
Yeah.
And we've eaten there.
Yeah. All kinds of foods. I'll have to try it.
That's just a side note, right?
Yeah. Side. So we kind of went into your personality, and I kind of wanted to go into yours because you said, you weren't much of a risk taker, but you're also kind of involved in a very artistic sort of, hands-on kind of creative space. So how does that work out?
I know it is a weird combination of personality traits in one person, but I'm not a risk taker. I do like to kind of know the path that's set in front of me, which we all know in life that's impossible. Yeah. Nobody does, but we trick our brain into thinking we do know. So if I can put myself in a place where I'm tricking myself into what the future holds, I'm usually okay. But I'm not a risk taker, but I'm not a worrier either. Like I don't have rarely ever have anxiety. I don't worry over things. And being creative, and I'm not an artist, and a lot of people think I must be an artist if I do picture framing, but I love art. I love being surrounded by artists. They have such a wonderful energy, and I have creative things that I do, like you can't, but over here, these dried floral boxes, like I created those. So I have creative outlets. And so people always say to me, but you are creative in your framing. And that's true. I'm not an artist, but I do have a creative side of me, which sometimes, butts heads with that overly cautious, non-risk taking part of me. But, any small business anywhere in the U.S. right now comes with an inherent risk, and you have to understand that. But the people of Tyler have been so wonderful. This is just such a nice place to live.
Yeah.
It really is. And the community in general has embraced us, and word of mouth has probably been our best advertising tool that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
So we have been very, very thankful and very appreciative of the response from the community. That's for sure.
Yeah. So now we'll take it back from the framing to y'all are finally deciding to go to how do you say it right? Because I know I've been saying it wrong. The country y'all went to.
Oh, Papua, Indonesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's sort of y'all's idea of what it's going to be like versus actually being there?
I think everybody, has a certain, they kind of romanticize, going to another country or living in another country, that it's going to be, this unique experience, and, they're looking for it. And I think we were certainly, to some extent, but so we had it's real interesting. Of course, our first trip over, we pack our bags. We've never really been that far away from the U.S. before, and so we're really not sure what we're in for. But we get out there, and there's, I can't remember, something wrong with the flight, the plane. It ended up taking us, headwinds and whatever, and then we had to stop, make an unscheduled stop where we missed a connection. I can't remember exactly, but it took us forever to finally get to Jakarta, which is like one of the largest cities in Indonesia, and then that's where the U.S. Embassy's at. That's where they do all the immigration and whatever, and so. An Indonesian person that works on the home office meets us when we get off the airplane, and he doesn't have a whole lot of English, and we have no Indonesian yet, right? We haven't started language school or anything like that, so we're barely able to communicate. So the first thing is this: you get off the plane, and this Indonesian guy that you don't know comes up and says, "Are you Brian and Tricia?" And we said, "Yes." And the next words out of his mouth are, "Give me your passports." And it's like, am I really supposed to hand my passport to some strange dude that I don't know that we just got, And so that's literally, and so we trust, and we hand over the passports, and we jump into this van, and we start, I don't even know how long of a drive it was. It seemed like it was probably an hour, through these crazy, city streets.
Well, it's like a million things or unusual stimuli hit you all at the same time, because you have the unusual smells, the unusual sounds, the unusual sights, and all of that is, and we have two small children with us.
And we're massively jet lagged. We haven't been to sleep for 36 hours.
Yeah,
right?
Because the plane ride itself, just the time on the plane is 27 hours. And then you've got layovers in 3 different places. So, you're like, and so you're just like, And then you spend 3 days at the guest house trying to get over jet lag, and then they put you on a train for an hour and a half, and you still have no Indonesian. We can't speak anything, and then we're on this train going in, but there were people meeting us on the other end, and we knew when we pulled up to the terminal who was picking us up. They were very easy to spot out.
Yeah, so most Indonesians, as most Asians, are a little bit on the shorter side, right? So. Yeah. And then here comes, one of the other people that are in language schools, because we went from Jakarta to Bandung via the train. And that's where the language school was. And so, they'd already arranged our housing and all this and that and whatever. And so one of the other missionary families that was in language school meets us, and Ted's like 6'3", 6'4", so it wasn't hard to spot the, super tall white guy, in this sea of Asian
people,
faces.
yeah.
And so then we were there in Bandung for language school for about a year and started to learn the culture. And that was a great experience because one of the ways they taught us in the language school is through the homework that we had, which was to go out, and make, acquaintances out in the community. And the questions that they would give you wasn't just about learning language, it was about learning the culture. So you'd learn the language through questions about the culture. And the funny thing is that, just with like Indonesia, we don't have so much of that here in the U.S., but it's a country, but it's made up of, thousands of people groups and thousands of languages. And so one of the funny thing is, we go to learning Indonesian, but we go out in the community and start talking to people, and they'd start giving us answers. But sometimes those answers were in the local language. Mm-hmm. It's called Sunda, which is different than the Indonesian language. And so you go back into class and start telling them all these things that you learned, only to find out, that's all Sundanese language. You need to go redo that.
So which of the two languages over there came more in handy? Was it Indonesian? Was that kind of like a
language? So you learn the Indonesian language, and so that was kind of that's kind of supposed to be universally spoken across the country as a kind of a unifying thing, and it was to certain levels. Of course, we learned the proper Indonesian. Then we when we started serving out in Papua, they use a much simpler kind of Indonesian, and so then we start adapting to that, and then you go back to Jakarta or whatever and start speaking to somebody and they're like, oh, you sound like you're from Papua. It's like, well, yeah, we are.
Kind of like people say, oh, you're from the South.
Yeah, you're from
like, oh, you're from Papua.
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting. And then, of course, in all my flying, we'd fly into, from the main city into the mountains and into the tribal areas and into all these little villages. And so, every different tribe or area, every village belonged to a tribe, and there was many, many, many tribes out there and many, many different languages. So I tried to learn at least how to say hello and some greetings and that kind of thing in each of the tribal languages. So when I got out of the airplane, I could kind of greet them in their native language and not just in Indonesian. But that was as far as it went. But, it's kind of interesting how different languages. So, you go to the Yali area, right? And the way they greet each other is, the word is halabuk. That's one of their greetings, right? Halabuk. Well, I come to find out later that if you translate halabuk to, in English, mm-hmm. It really means I'm so happy to see you that I'd eat your poop. So there you go. I'm jumping out of the plane saying I want to eat your poop. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And and that brings up another whole, you're talking about, how do you deal with things in different cultures or whatever is about. So we got done through language school, which was about a year, and then we, went to Papua. And within a week of going to Papua, Tricia's really not feeling good at all. And I'll let you tell the story if you want.
Well, I wasn't feeling well at all, and that started in language school. But you're just transitioning, and you wonder if it's just stress. Mm-hmm. So we get to Papua, and there's a nurse talking to me, and she's asking me what are my symptoms, and I told her, and she said, and she said, I think I need to check your blood sugar. So within 3 days of being in Papua, I found out I had type well, they thought I had type 2 diabetes. I was actually misdiagnosed by the doctor there, and then re-diagnosed about 18 months later with type 1 diabetes. But they didn't want me to actually, our organization, as I was saying, that the organization thought maybe it was best to send us home since I would have been just newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. But we decided to stay, and there was a doctor there that was willing to take me under his care. It's, again, just another series of miracles. And, for 15 years, I was able to live there, got my medication out of Jakarta, and people were always available to hand carry it to across the country to Papua for me. And it actually probably turned out to be have a silver lining to it, because in Papua, we had to cook almost 100% of our own food. Like if you wanted tacos, you were making your own tortillas. Yeah. If you wanted lasagna, you were making your own lasagna noodles. So what I was eating was really a very, very healthy lifestyle. And I think that probably helped me initially. And I think that's why there's such an issue with it here in the U.S., because we don't do the kind of cooking for ourselves that we used to.
Yeah. Yeah. So through all this kind of transition there, how are your kids kind of feeling about being over there?
Well, they were really young when we went over there, right? But not so, so missionary kids, or what they like to call third culture kids, are, they have a very unique perspective on the world. They had enough time here in the U.S. because they were in 3rd and 4th grade when we went over there, right? 3rd and 4th, I believe, yeah. So they had already had enough time in the U.S. to kind of ground themselves a little bit. Of course, when people go over there with babies or really young children, then they have no frame of reference as to like their home culture or whatever. But so these kids are aptly named third culture kids because they have their home culture, and then they have the culture in which they grew up and lived in. For our kids, that was Indonesia. And they really don't fit in. I mean, they're not Indonesian, and they're not native. They don't fit into the Indonesian culture, but they aren't really truly American either, because they haven't grown up in the U.S. and gotten all of the good and bad that you can get from, our home culture. Yeah. So they're really not the same as us. And so they're their own unique third culture, and that's why they call them third culture kids, where they take some of the best from both, worlds. For example, when we first came back, or one time when we came back for a short furlough, we went to the store, we got a loaf of bread, we come back to the house or whatever, and I take the little plastic clip off the bread or whatever, make the bread, and then one of my kids comes in and sees this little plastic clip laying on the counter, and it's like, what is this? I mean, they had no idea what that was or what it was for, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that, in a small snapshot, that's just, the kind of, you get the idea of how they don't really understand everything that, so when we come back, or when the kids came back for college, they had no idea how to do a lot of things that just comes very naturally to kids that, have grown up here, and they had to learn all of those things for the first time, things that, somebody might have learned in, junior high or high school, or, whatever is growing up. How do you navigate the United States, which they
even learning how to drive.
Yeah.
Now,
our kids drove a motorcycle before they ever drove
a car.
Yeah.
So
while y'all are over there for this stretch of time, what is it exactly that like y'all are focused on working on while you're over there?
So we went over there as a missionary pilot family, and so my job day to day was to provide air transportation needs mostly for the local church. So we did all kinds of, really every kind of flight that you could imagine between, a larger population center, for example, like, a larger city, a capital city on the coast, about 100 miles or so to the mountains, which are in the middle of the island. And when I say island, people think, oh, did you fly between islands? No, you have to understand so Papua is on the island of New Guinea. Mm-hmm. The island of New Guinea is the second largest island in the world behind Greenland. So the western half of the island is the province of Papua, part of Indonesia. The eastern half of the island is Papua New Guinea, which is its own country. Okay, so just our half, just the western half of the island, measured about 850 miles from east to west and about 450 miles north to south. So all of our flying was centered only on that island.
And there's no infrastructure taking people, there's no roads.
Yeah.
Except for on the coast. So the only way to get into the interior villages is by airplane.
Right. Yeah. So my flying, we did, humanitarian relief, famine relief, economic development projects, community development, clean water projects, electrification for like hydroelectric in the village or solar panels, built health clinics, schools, other government office buildings, churches. So every single thing that had to do with building a building had to be flown into the village. Yeah. So, I mean, every single nail, every single, bag of concrete, anything that you could possibly think of, with the exception of the wood, because they'd go and cut the trees down in the forest and literally use a chainsaw to cut them into boards. Yeah. And so they would, if they were building whatever they were building with wood, that would be sourced locally from the local timber, but everything else had to be flown in. So we flew a lot of construction teams in and out. As far as, from the mission standpoint, some foreign missionaries, expat missionaries, but that was getting less and less as the local churches were taking over. So we focused more on the local churches and their evangelistic outreach with their, leadership development courses, Bible translation. So we ended up flying a lot of church leaders, pastors, evangelists, Bible translators between the village and the coast. The Wycliffe Bible translators, SIL is known in the rest of the world, had a huge translation center out on the coast. And so we'd end up flying translation helpers from the village to the coast where a lot of the translation work was being done. So that was kind of what my day-to-day was, flying from the villages to a larger city, bringing food, supplies, people, whatever. We were the mailman, the milkman, and the hearse when sometimes we transported bodies that needed to go back to their villages. So yeah, pretty much anything.
Yeah. So you said that you kind of started flying as sort of a hobby thing. So how much of a transition was that from a hobby Cessna plane to then kind of going into bush pilot mode out there?
Right. So that's a lot of training. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of time, to get to that. Of course, building the amount of flight hours and the experience that you need in order to do that, to qualify. Then, at the time when we joined with MAF, their headquarters was in Redlands, California. It's in Nampa, Idaho now, but at any rate, you end up going to the headquarters and going through a technical evaluation where they'll put you in an airplane and, you show them, how good or bad a pilot you are. And then they can decide whether they can work with that or build on that. And then, of course, it takes a lot of additional training in mountain flying techniques. We ended up, they would go up to Idaho into the backcountry there and had an entire mountain flying course that you had to go through and pass before you could go out. Then we went to language school, and then you go out to the field, and then you continue your training out on the field. And it's a building block process. So the first couple of years you're out there, after you get checked out, which can be like a 6-month process just to get approved to be able to fly on your own out there. Once you do that, over the next year and a half, you're flying only to the easiest places, right? Mm-hmm. And as you gain experience, then they start adding on a little bit more difficult airstrips and more difficult runways and environments and whatever. And it takes, I'd say, probably 4 to 6 years of flying every single day into the mountains before you are ready to be checked out into the hardest places that we flew into.
Yeah. So what makes like the hardest place that you had to fly into?
You mean the conditions? I mean,
you know, they're working you up to this, so I just kind of want to get an idea of like.
So, you know, it's hard to give people a frame of reference when, you know, I mean, if you're looking at runways, here, I mean, they're long paved things that are easily identifiable as a runway. You know, a lot of places that we landed, you know, one of the more difficult ones are blind approaches where you can't actually see the airstrip from when you're making your approach. Committal points, you know, we're flying in very tight valleys. Mm-hmm. With very little limited options. It's not like, you know, here, you know, the pilot comes down, something weird happens on the runway or just before touchdown, the pilot says, hey, okay, I'm going to go around and back up you go. That's not possible in probably 90% of the airstrips that we go into because of being in a mountainous terrain. You cannot outclimb that terrain. The valley's too tight to turn around. There's points at which after you continue that approach beyond a certain point, you are going to land. Either you're going to land on that runway or you're going to crash into a mountain. Those are the two choices that you have. And so working up to those places, ones that have those committal points that are, you know, way far back up the valley, you know, sometimes you can fly almost to touchdown and then be able to still go. But in other places, it might be, you know, a mile and a half back. After which, you know, you're landing and you may not even be able to see the runway yet.
Yeah.
And you're committed to making that landing. So things like that, just really strong illusions in the mountains. Mountains, you know, because there's no flat terrain. Everything is vertical. You have no horizon reference when you're flying. So being able to overcome or understand the illusions that you'll experience while in the mountains, you know, as to whether you're, you know, above something, below something, you know, all those kinds of things. It takes a long time to gain that, you know, experience and skill to be able to do that. So it's not something you want to just throw somebody into on the first day. You want to let them go into the easier ones. You don't want to
be the guy who takes the Cessna out on a weekend. And
right. Yeah.
Be thrown into the mountains.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to overcome all of those things. Learning to land on, you know, very steeply sloped runways. None of our runways were flat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, other than at the main cities, right? The main airports. Outside of that, when you get into the villages, I mean, there wasn't one that was flat. They're either going up a hill, down a hill, and each one of those, depending on the upslope or the downslope and how much slope, all brings about different illusions and can cause you to get yourself into a real big, you know, problem real quick if you're not able to overcome those. So
I remember the first flight that I went on with Brian. You know, he's talking to me on the headset and he's like, okay, we're coming up to the airstrip. And I'm like, I don't see it. He's like, it's right there. And I'm like, there's not, it's all green. Yeah. It's all jungle. I see no airstrip. And he's like, it's right there. And I was like, do you mean this little patch that big? And he goes, yeah, that's the airstrip. I was like, that's a postage stamp. That is not an airstrip. But of course you get closer and I'm like, how is he gonna, how are you gonna land there? It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And he did. And we had a pretty decent landing too.
Pretty decent?
Pretty decent. It wasn't a 10.
I did all right. You know.
It was an 8.5, you know.
Flying good, you know.
Yeah.
So what would y'all say was like, and I'll let y'all, you know, tell different stories because I'm sure it's different for each person, but like the most impactful part of being over there or impactful story for you?
Go ahead.
I think it might not be a story, but just a series of stories is just understanding that God's grace and mercy is for all. And I remember I worked at a clinic. I did some administrative stuff at an AIDS clinic. And I remember sitting next to this beautiful young lady. Her name was Newslin. And she had 6 months earlier been told that she had AIDS. And it was from one sexual encounter, one time. And just listening to her talk about and understand fully that her life was going to be cut short and what joy she still had and how thankful that she was for those 15 and a half years that she had on the earth. And for me, I was actually present right before she passed. I was present in the room and I was holding onto her hand and we were praying. And I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to talk about. And she just said, Tricia, but of course, because they couldn't pronounce my name, it was Tirsa, which I've already explained to you. So she was like, Tirsa, it's okay. It's okay. Jesus is waiting for me. I can see him. And then she passed like 2 days later. But to me, just the grace that she went from her diagnosis and her thankfulness that she had for life all the way up, even though it was cut so short, always stuck with me. And I think that, again, going back to just hearing people's stories, everybody has tragedy, but everybody also is surrounded by such joy, and it's choosing in life, and I saw through that story, to choose the joy and not that tragedy. Because we've all seen that. We've all seen people that walk through life with such an air about them that it's you want to be with them. And you almost always find out it's somebody who is choosing purposefully joy. Because if you knew the tragedy that was behind that, you would be like, how? Mm-hmm. And for me, all of those stories, all of those really neat things and the stories just go on. We could sit here for hours telling you these cool stories because it's a different life perspective. But all of them lead back to me to the same thing, and that we need to be grateful for the life that's been given and search for the joy in every situation.
No, you're waiting for me to say something. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I could sit, like I said, bore you with all kinds of stories and of things that, happened, or places that I went, or people, just all kinds of different events. I mean, we were there for 15 years, so tons of sad, crazy things happen.
But I do think you need to tell the story about the baby that was named not after you.
Okay.
You need to tell that story.
Okay, so, I mean, it's not normal, right? So, I take off with, first of all, it's not normal to take off with 9 people on board and land with 10. That's, kind of odd in the first place. But, so, I mean, so probably our highest priority flight that we had were medevac flights, and we did a lot of medevac flights. We did a lot of medevac flights for pregnant women that were having complications with delivery and birth and whatnot out in the village, and the local village health person would make the determination at some point that hey, this delivery is not progressing, so we need to get them to the hospital or whatever. So we'd end up going out there, we'd pick them up, and that happened all the time. A lot of times you'd either have a nurse, a doctor, or a village health worker that would go along with. And most of our flights were, in the about an hour range. So it wasn't very likely that, somebody was going to actually deliver and give birth. But in this case, actually just the change in altitude and maybe the vibrations from the plane, I don't know, whatever caused her to actually be able to deliver the baby. And so she was able to deliver on board the airplane. So about halfway through the flight, baby is delivered. of course, everything's kind of a wreck, in the back, and
But everybody's okay.
everybody's okay. Everything's fine. We land, and arranged to have the ambulance. Actually, I think the ambulance was already meeting us there, so that was no big. But they weren't expecting, a baby, and so in other countries, the registration for the aircraft is usually tied to the organization or the company that you work for. So, for example, all of our registrations for our aircraft all started with R and actually they all started with RC because we worked for the Catholic mission, so it was Roman Catholic. So it was RC, and we'd have RCA, RCB, RCD. So we'd spell that phonetically. So it was always Romeo Charlie, and the plane I was flying that day was Bravo. So it was Romeo Charlie Bravo. That's the plane I was flying. Mm-hmm. So we normally shorten that to just Charlie Bravo. So you're talking on the radio is Charlie Bravo. So all they're hearing is Charlie Bravo, Charlie Bravo. So the baby was born on the airplane, and her name is Charlie Bravo. So very interesting way to name their kid. But hey, and
I'm sorry,
it kind of works. I mean, it's kind of a cool name, I think.
And you can now actually answer Isaac's original question about the takeaway. Maybe that was sort of your question. The takeaway.
Right. So I mean, there's a million stories like that, right? Some very sad, some 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 amazing, some very spiritual, some very worldly. I mean, there's anything. I almost got chopped up and killed by an angry mob with a machete one day. Okay, that was a bad day. I've had other days when I was fine, and I had malaria one time. I was feeling fine. I get out to the village. I'm feeling really sick. It was amazing. They saw that I was sick. They saw that I was struggling. They pulled me to the side. I'm trying to organize getting the airplane unloaded and reloaded. They're like, no, come over here, sit down. What's wrong? Oh, I'm not feeling good. Okay. All of a sudden I've got 1,000 people from the village and the local evangelists and the pastors and everything from every church, praying over me, laying hands on me, heal him, that kind of thing. So amazing stories like that, just very strong, powerful spiritual stories, crazy stories of, chickens and goats and pigs and cows on runways and things like that.
Or airplane pods opening up mid-flight and a pig falling out.
Yeah, that happened. I'm flying along. I don't know. The pig got mad. We transport a lot of live pigs.
Yeah.
Tied up their feet, whatever. They put a rice bag over their behind so they didn't, poop all over the plane. And this pig got a little bit loose and kicked hard enough on the pod door to get the pod door to open and wiggle, and boom, out he goes at 14,000 feet. So, and I kept on envisioning like I'm flying over a village, and all of a sudden, like this pig just wham slams right down in the middle of the village, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm from heaven," kind of thing. So it's like, I just, crazy stuff. But the biggest takeaway, what I learned over there is that not what I could do for anybody. God didn't send us over there. This is what I realized or learned through that. As you go out there, you're seeing all this amazing stuff. You see how impoverished in your mind these people are, how backward they live, all those kinds of things. And your natural tendency to sit there and think, here I am, the great white missionary, just, here to save the savage, and it was like, no, that's not it. God took us over there because he had something to teach me. And it wasn't really what I could do for them. It was really about how God changed me through the experience. And he doesn't need me to go over there and fly airplanes for him. I'm pretty sure God can take care of business. He doesn't need me to do it for him. So it was really about just trusting him and listening and realizing who I am in his family and what he wants me to be. And that was probably the most powerful thing, or what I learned over the years. And it's not a lesson that I learned perfectly by any means, but he took me there on purpose to teach me something, not for me to do something for anybody else.
Yeah. So I guess one more thing and then I'll let y'all wrap it up with whatever y'all want. But that interests me is what is the transition from going there to coming back here to Tyler, Texas?
It's actually easier to go there than it was to come back.
Yeah.
And not because we came back to Tyler instead of Ohio, where we originally were from, but doing something a certain way for 15 years and then coming back. And we did come back to a U.S. that wasn't the same that when we left. And of course it wasn't the same, but I think everybody can admit that our country has seen some very interesting changes over the last 20 years. So the transition back was a little bit harder for us, but
if you don't mind me asking, what year did y'all leave? I'm trying to do the math in my head, but
2004 technically, yeah. So it was 2004, 2005. So we were in the air. We traveled basically on was it
Christmas and
Day?
New Year. Yeah.
Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, right? So we basically you could say January of 2005.
2005.
Yeah, when we got there.
And then returned in May of 2019.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of things.
A lot of things changed during that time in our country, and and two, just all realizing that we were coming back with possessions that filled a 4 foot by 4 foot crate. So now we had to purchase a car, fulfill that home. I mean, we don't even have a fork, so, that transition of kind of coming back to that was overwhelming. I mean, even just walking into Walmart, like I would walk into Walmart and go like, I can't do this today. Yeah. Like there's just having 24 boxes of cereal to choose from instead of 3 was almost just overwhelming. And,
that's true. I mean, that's just anxiety. I mean, the anxiety of walking into a Walmart. Sorry,
any store,
mean any store, but I didn't, mean to cut you off, but yeah, I was trying to say it was like, we'd walk into a store and be like, oh my God, they have soup today. Like,
yeah,
it didn't matter what kind. They just had a can of soup, or they had, hey, and it literally a text message that would go out if they happen to have regular plain potato chips at the store. They wouldn't be there for a half hour later because somebody would text every other missionary in town and be like, they got potato chips in, and they'd all run down there and try to grab we'd all run down and try to grab a bag of potato chips because we never got that. And so you'd walk in the store, it's like, oh, look, they have cereal today. It's cornflakes. I mean, that's what you get, Yeah. And so to go from that to back to this, where you have an entire aisle and the choices, it was... She's not exaggerating. It's literally overwhelming and gives you anxiety when you had so many
and realizing
choices.
that you didn't have to buy 20 of the spice packets.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know when they'd have it in again.
Yeah.
It's just kind of weird things the everyday things.
Walmart, all the spice.
Yeah.
I mean, we would come on furlough. We would just, buy 15 packs of ranch dressing packets because you just didn't, you had to take it with you if you wanted to have that there. But, and then too, just the spiritual aspect of, being in a job that you perceive, and this isn't other people, but that you feel like at least on a day-to-day impacts other people. Mm-hmm. And then coming back to the U.S. where that it's hard to get your mind in a place where you can consider your job that it impacts people on a daily basis. And I think for both of us, that's really important, us to give back. And we do that through some of the different products that we carry in our stores. Some of them promote different missions. But just to kind of go from doing something that you felt like you were totally serving to something where you're not serving, but how do you incorporate that into what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was true for me, in the flying that I did. I mean, every single flight that I did impacted somebody's life in a very meaningful, powerful way. Now I carry boxes for a large package delivery service. I mean, I don't want to say the company, but everybody would know.
You don't want to say like it's completely pointless working for.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the difference between that, making sure that somebody gets their package, on time is,
Yeah.
It's like you are complaining because you ordered something yesterday and it didn't come today.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's not the end of the world. Here, come with me. Let's go over there and I will show you what real,
Let's
desperation
try
is.
overnight shipping over
It's
here.
not that you didn't get your Quaker instant oatmeal today, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm out of good questions at this point. So if there's anything y'all would like to wrap up the podcast with.
Well, I just appreciate you, thinking that we have an interesting story and putting this on your podcast. It's
Well, I mean, it definitely is. Like you said, I'm sure we could spend another hour or two.
Oh, easily. We could tell you so many interesting things, but just it's what you take out of all those interesting experiences and how you move forward, and thankful that you had those.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think learning to like not hold on to, 'cause I think you were asking earlier about, the shop and the risk and everything like that. You know what? If, we're blessed to be able to have this today. If tomorrow it goes away, whatever. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned is to not hold on to things so tightly. Mm-hmm. If some, I mean, and just we were, learning earlier today was, you have no idea, what tomorrow brings, right? So don't, you can't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to do this or that, or make all these plans or whatever, because you don't know if you even have a tomorrow, right? I mean, we could all die in a, car crash, especially if you're on Broadway, We were talking about how good people were, how amazing and nice people in Tyler are. They are all until like this inner rage comes out when they start driving on Broadway. Right? So, but no, I really appreciate.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and for people listening, definitely come out, check out the store if nothing else, just for the artwork. But definitely also buy something while you're there.
We won't keep you from buying anything. Yeah.
But no, seriously, thank y'all for spending time sitting down and just giving me this opportunity to talk to people.
No
All right,
problem.
thank you.
Oh, hi. You made it to the end. Congratulations. Not many people do that. While you're here, as well, like and subscribe, and check out our social media on Instagram and Facebook under the same name as down there. Thanks.
Saying hi.